Welcome to the Elokus channel. We are now in class number 16 in the discourse Kol Machlokes 5672, which is the sixth discourse in the overall book, 5672. And we are now going to learn the second class in chapter 25. So yesterday we began exploring another metaphor, another example of the reduction of energy that happens when you differentiate something into its particles, into its details. So we were talking like there's a grand idea, and every idea contains within itself parts of the idea. And as we study all the parts of the idea, it all comes together to create one higher and more powerful concept. But each particle on its own is also significant, also has its own concept. It's like a whole bunch of small ideas. There is a whole bunch of small ideas that serve as the as when they come together, they have this grandiose idea. So this greater concept, this greater power, goes away once you start breaking it down, which would mean a teacher, a person who's a thinker, a philosopher, comes up with has this great innovative idea. And it's based on all the knowledge they've learned in their life and everything that they've accumulated. And now they have this powerful, like mind-blowing, earth-shattering new concept. And but when they're going to teach it, they have to break it down and first make all the introductions that in order for the person to understand such and such, they have to know this, A, B, C, D, E, and depending on how great that idea is, you maybe need to know all the way to Z in order to be able to have, and then you have enough, all these parts and pieces which can all come together, and inside them they can facilitate this one powerful concept, this new brainstorm that the teacher has understood. So we learned two things happen. Number one, when the teacher begins to break it down and starts delivering to the students the various different lessons. Let's say it's going to be as many lessons as the alphabet from A to Z. I don't know how many letters there are in the Hebrew alphabet. At 22. I'm not sure in the English alphabet. In any case, if you give in each lesson, you teach one of these concepts. So the students, they're just, even when they understand the lesson really well, they're just seeing this. They don't see the greater idea. And there might be, as we learned yesterday, that there is a student who starts catching on, a very bright student who's in the middle, even if you didn't make it to Z, even if we're still holding by H or L or M or N, O, P, somewhere over there, the student is already seeing that there is beginning to sense the greater grandiose idea that is being revealed. But even then, it's in a minuscule level, in a minimized level. So we learned, again, there is a student sometimes that's not catching at all on the idea. Now, even though, let's understand something, if from A to Z, if all these parts, if all these lessons are all necessary to understand the idea, that means that there's a little bit of the idea that is present in each of these concepts. And you need to bring them all together in order to be able to bring forth and to see the entire picture. But in each part, there's a part of it. And we learned something else, which is really interesting, that the teacher who knows the entire concept, they can see how in each part, how it contains within itself a part of a greater idea. So they're not learning this subject as an independent entity onto its own, but as a piece of a puzzle of a much bigger picture. But the student is not seeing that. Or even if the student, he or she does see that, they see it in a very limited fashion. That was basically what we learned yesterday. And this is going to serve as an example to further explain the idea of how, we're going to see that today clearer, how there is this grand godly concept that is expressed in the emanation of the entire realm of the sphirot, of the attributes, which are the 10 attributes. There is this cosmic, powerful objective, so to speak, divine objective that is being realized and actualized through the sum totality of all of existence. But we don't get to know that because we're only seeing tiny little fragments and little pieces. It's only when everything is laid out. It's almost like you can't see what creation is all about until you scan the full entirety of all of creation, all of existence. Then you can see what it is. Okay? And it's going to apply that to God. And it's going to begin to become PC once the 10 sefirot differentiate each one individually. When they're all together in the mind of God, the initial emanation of these 10 sefirot as they all shear together that one space where they're all perfectly unified one with each other, then the powerful, grandiose purpose of all of them is very, very sharply felt. Once they start emanating independently, there is a reduction. And the grand idea becomes lesser felt and lesser felt and lesser felt, at least to the eyes of the recipients. And it's possible that they miss and they don't even see at all what the greater story is. Okay. So now let's see over here. We were holding on page Lametes over here. We learned a little. So by the teacher, we learned a few lines before. Okay, now mashpia, the influence of the teacher. The teacher was coming from a place that he knows already the entire lesson, not only the one lesson. He knows the entire semester. He knows the entire book. He knows the whole thing. It's like the Rebbe Rashab. We gave the example, the author of this book, who conceived the entire 3 volumes or 10 volumes, whatever it is. This entire incredible, great study. He knows what's the point. If you ask the Rebbe Rashab, what is he delivering in this discourse of Ayin Beis, he will tell you, he can say it, and he will tell you, but he can tell a great, 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 great Hasidic. The Rebbe Rashab can say to the Mittler Rebbe, let's say, to his predecessor, or to the Rebbe, someone like that, he can say, you know what the Chiddush of Ayin Beis is? You know what the novelty is? I'm over here revealing the depth of such and such, which in that one statement he'll be capturing what the Ayin Beis, what the entire book of 5672 is presenting. But we, who are barely swimming in it, we're learning, and it's not like we're not understanding. Thank God. I think we're understanding a little bit as we learn chapter by chapter, and we learn Maayon discourse by discourse. We're nibbling at it. And hopefully when we finish the entire book, as we discussed yesterday, if we remember what we learned at the beginning, we're going to have gain a perspective that's similar to the perspective of what the Rebbe Rashab had in mind when he created the book. If we don't forget, and if we study, and it doesn't go in one ear and go out of the other ear, as we retain the information, we will definitely have something. We're going to see soon. We're never going to have it as sharp as the author because we're coming from a different place. That we're going to see in a minute. We didn't analyze that yet, but we're going to gain that. But so by the teacher itself, of course, he knows all the parts. That comes the grand idea that comes from all these details. And this intelligent, grasped idea is shining by him. As understood from all the details. Not only that, the teacher sees how the Rebbe Rashab, for instance, the author, sees in every discourse how this is an integral part of the grandiose idea that he's explaining. Which isn't the case by the recipient. We don't know the entire book. We only know a little part of it. So first of all, the greater idea is by us very, very minimal. The greater idea is by us very, very minimal because it is very, 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 very diminished. I know meaning, and explains it over here. To get the idea of the entire book, the entire Ayin Beis, us as students, trying to get where is the Rebbe Rashab, where is the author, where is he going with this in general, that we might not see it at all, and even if we do see it, we're seeing it very, very vaguely. It's very vague and very, very dim. And then definitely to be able to explain how And even if we do have somewhat an understanding and appreciation of where he's going with this, and again, I would probably say that it will take us quite a bit more to get much deeper into the book to be able to get a vague idea where he's going with this, other than that he's explaining the divine. Obviously, that we understand. But to know, like, what is chiddush, what is the novelty, what is the main, what is he giving us in this book that was not presented before in all the other discourses of Chassidus? Because really these concepts are explained in other places, maybe not as thorough, but they're explained. Like, there's some soul over here, there's some depth over here that is in this book, and it's not conveyed anywhere else. We're not getting that yet. We're still holding only in the sixth discourse. We're very far. But even if we're to be holding, as we said, in when we're going to be already in the 90th discourse, and we're kind of going to get a sense of where it's going, that's going to be a limited sense in the entire idea of the book. And even more limited is going to be our understanding of how each discourse is an integral part. How in each discourse it reflects some of the idea of the general idea. That we're going to have even less understanding, because there's two levels in the teacher's understanding. Number one, the teacher sees the whole idea. Another even deeper idea is that the teacher gets to see in every lesson, in every individual particle, he gets to see them. It's almost like God sees in the tiniest cell of existence. God sees the entire cosmos, how everything is reflected in every little part. We don't see that, right? So that takes even more. And also in this, that in every detail, you know how this contributes to the general sichli, the general idea. That is very, very, very limited to the student, while the student is still putting together the pieces one by one. For Habatalia, one is of course dependent on the other, because our understanding and the general principle of what is being conveyed is very dim and very limited. So the understanding of how the details are each reflecting the greater whole is definitely diminished. That's what I think he's saying. But nevertheless, even though if we're not aware of it, that doesn't change the fact that every part of it does have some of the great idea. Now, what happens after we'll finish studying the entire book? When all the parts will finish, when the student finishes the entire semester, with all the classes from A to Z, so they've gone through the entire, I don't know how they call it, the whole lesson book. Now, the student, we might think, is on par with the teacher, because the student now, if he retains the information and studied it well and really gets it, then we would think the student also has the brilliant idea that the teacher had. And secondly, not only does the student have the general idea, they also can see in the details how each part is part of the bigger idea. Why the teacher needed all these lessons and didn't suffice with 3/4 of the lessons, because they understand how each part contributes and so forth. However, nevertheless, there's a very big difference from the way it is in the mind of the teacher, before the teacher taught it, then the way it is to the recipient after. Because here's the idea. The teacher and the student, if the teacher is a real teacher, which means to say, I'm going to exclude myself, because I'm teaching you, but I'm not teaching you. I'm giving this class. I'm not giving this class in the same way the Rebbe Rashab is teaching it, because the Rebbe, he conceived this idea in a very abstract form. He conceived the essence of the idea, like we mentioned yesterday, how he stood in that place and he was deep for hours. He was out of town somewhere again. I think it was in Germany or in Vienna, and his mind was deeply kind of completely consumed for hours upon hours in a trance. He conceived some incredible original ideas in Chassidus, deep innovations in Hasidic thought, and then later he built it up. From there, he extrapolated all the details, And then he took these details and each one he formed the discourse from it and broke it down. So he came from the essence of the concept, and then in the essence of the idea, he found the details, and then he himself contracted the details and made it palpable to us until we can read and we can get the details. We're working the other way around. We're starting from the pieces, from the external details, and building and building and building. And when we finish building the house, then we get to see that it's a house. It's like the difference between the person who conceived the house, the original dreamer who dreamed of the house. He dreams of a house. He doesn't dream of windowsills and a place to hang a toothbrush. He dreams of a house. But then he breaks it down into the details, and in the details, he has what the shower curtain will look like. But the shower curtain came to him as a result of the larger picture of this magnificent palace. But the worker who's working, or the onlooker who's getting to see it from the pieces, we're working the other way around. From seeing it, especially if you're not seeing it, especially if you're reading about it, you're being handed a blueprint, and you have a bunch of jotted lines, and you have to study it from the details. And from the details, you create the image. So then what he's saying is, even when you create the image that you're going to create, which is coming from the details, is not the sharp, living, powerful dream that the initial visionary had, because it's being built up from the outside in. It's not coming from the inside. It's not touching the essence. And that's what he's saying over here, that the teacher, and that makes a difference. See, if you're reading this book and then you're teaching to someone, then the teacher himself is getting to the idea through the details. So then this teacher could possibly be, and then the teacher and student can possibly have the same level of understanding. But we're talking in the case like the Rebbe's case, like the author's case, where it did not that he read this and then he's teaching it. He's the author. He's the one who's initiating all these ideas, uncovering all these truths and all these, conceiving the ideas. And he's conceiving them in the most abstract of abstract. So to him, the details themselves are far sharper and luminous, because they're completely integrated. They're in a state of pshitus. They're very simple and very, 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 very abstract, as opposed to the density that happens when you're reading it and you're understanding it from the bottom up. By the influence, all the details were very, very fine, and they were very spiritual, in a very abstract form. And therefore, and because all the details are in the most abstract form, that's why the details are not distracting from the soul of the matter, from the nucleus of the matter. In other words, the details don't block. They're not occupying space in his mind. They're kind of sitting in a way that they are so lost in the greater picture. It's like seeing. The difference between seeing and hearing. When you see something, you see the entirety. So even though, as we said earlier, when you're looking at the palace, the curtains are there, and the carpets are there, and the tapestries are there, and the light fixtures are there, but you're not seeing a light fixture. You're not at all seeing. You're seeing a palace, and within the palace are all these millions of pieces, all as part of a bigger palace. But when you're putting it together by learning, you're reading in a manual or in some kind of a place, it says that on the roof there were, 300 light fixtures, and the light fixtures were made out of metal and bronze. And so even if you're imagining and you're putting it all together in your head, the bronze of it and the shape of the light fixtures is interfering a little, because the coarseness of it is not allowing you to see the beauty of the palace as a whole, because you're too fixated on the fixtures. You're too caught on the details. The details are occupying the particles, and the pieces are far more piecey, and therefore they're blocking the sharpness of the image. That's the idea. By the teacher, because he's not seeing the details in a coarse way, but in a very refined way. The details are emerging from the essence. Therefore, there's a lot of light in all of it. Which isn't possible by the recipient. By the recipients, the details are very enclosed. They're coming through real understanding and grasping. In other words, in the garments. In other words, for example, the fact that we're using metaphors. Think about it right now. We're speaking about godly lights, the light of God that is the purpose and shining within all of the universe and all of existence. And what am I using as an example? We're using a palace and the light that's radiating in a palace. That's a joke, literally a joke. I'm using a physical example. Yes, it's something magnificent, but what kind of magnificence is it? It's like, and even if we're going to build the idea and we're going to abstract it, because it's coming from the coarseness of what he calls garments of understanding, and because even on the highest levels, there's still some kind of a garment of understanding. When you understand something through a metaphor, you're always working through something garbing and enclothing it. You're not seeing it, you're seeing what is enclothing it. And therefore, even when we receive all the details, and the idea shines after you concluded the entire lesson, you put it all together and you created some picture, you're drawing up the picture in your mind. It's no more in such a fine way. And therefore, because it's not so fine, it's more chunky. Therefore, the light that's in it is not shining with such brightness. There isn't such a brilliant light. It's lacking the abundant light. It's a much dimmer light. It's not that much light. And now he's now clarifying that the difference between the teacher and student he's not referring to something even deeper. And what is it even deeper? He's going to say there is something else over here. There's a certain depth of an idea that the teacher doesn't even convey to the student. And that's general. And everything that we try to convey to others, there is only that much you can put into words and you can put into your communication, you can put into your lesson. And there's a certain inner light that is just not transmittable. If the student comes to it on his own, good for them. If they don't, then they will never do that. But, you try your best and you communicate the best you can. So there's a certain soul, there's a certain neshama of the idea, there's a certain inner light idea that just doesn't go over in the words and doesn't go over in the explanations. He says, that's not what I'm talking about. Of course, that's a difference between the teacher and the student. But we're talking about something else. Talking about the external elements of an idea that is being delivered and enclosed and put into the lessons, that is being conveyed. Even that which is transmitted and given over, what the teacher sees in that transmission, setting aside the deeper truth that they haven't even transmitted, but even just looking at the shallower element of their lesson that they gave, that shallower lesson is much more brilliant than it has a much more brilliant light than the student is seeing in that lesson. And that's what he's saying over here. We're not speaking over here on the depth and the innermost of the idea, because that's not transmitted at all. We're talking about talking about that which is apprehended, moving and understood by inyan in the idea. In other words, that which the teacher student. Even in that, there is a difference. Because by the influencer, meaning by the teacher, in all the details, there's a lot of light. And in a very elevated state. First of all, I guess he means in quantity and in quality. A lot of light, and the quality is everything is far finer, everything is very elegant, everything is very refined. But by the recipient, the light is not a lot, it's a lesser light quantity, and it's also quality It's a coarser understanding. Kolkach kamo etzel mashpia. It's not as bright and as refined and elevated as it is by the teacher. And all of this is going to serve as a metaphor. Yashleima be'inyan esespheres. We'll understand as we apply this idea by the 10 sphirot. And what is that? In addition to 10 sphirot, which one sphera is chachma, and the other sphera is bina, is understanding and kindness, where each attribute is of incredible quality on its own, if there's something about all these 10 together that God is intending. And obviously, this intention that he has, an emanation of these 10 sphirot, is the deeper intention that he has in creating the worlds exactly the way they were created. In this particular way. Because God, as we know, just like we learned earlier, that Hashem has the possibility of spheros and kates, God could have created all of existence with infinite other possibilities. And there could have been infinite amount of options of how the world would have been, and it would have been a different theme. It would have meant something else to God, and it would have been a complete different intention in creation. The fact that God created the world precisely like this wasn't just he had all the options decided this way, and either way would work. No, he had a specific intention that he intended. But that intention can only really be seen if you see the entire cosmic order altogether. And that is, in the original form, when the 10 sphirot are all originally developed. The moment we said God was thinking about a creation, the moment he wanted an audience, we said he already bends the light of the Or Ein Sof to become, whichever way we discussed earlier, in the subtlest way, conditioned to 10 sphirot and not more. And these specific 10. Because only that realizes his intention. In Yesh Kavana Pnimis, there's an internal intention, B'matzala Elyon, and the supernal emanator Baruch Hu, Be'inyan Atzilus Bechlal, in the general emanation of the world of Atzilus, which is the realm of the divine, pre-creation state, Uma Shenetzlu Esesphiris Davka, and this that God emanated 10 Sephirot, Eser V'Loi Tesha, 10 and not 9, as it says in the Zohar, that there is an emphasis. Only 10, not 9. Only 10, not 11. Through emanating these 10 spheres, this delivers, this brings forth, or this facilitates, if you might say, this intention. It serves the purpose of what God is intending. Look in Pardes, which is writings of Ramosha Kardava, the Ramak, where he gives a reason for the Atzilus. Ubashar Shem Ben Dalit, and there's another portal over there where he explains the name of God of 4, which is the Yud Kei Vav Kei, Perek Aleph, where he's going to there Anu Be'etz Chaim Shara Klolim, and also in Eitz Chaim, it's already going to Ari. He's now moving from the Pardes, from the Ramak, Ramosha Kardava, to the Ari, and both of them are giving a general idea of what is the purpose of creation. And Kosef over there he writes, to do good to his creations, and what's the good of the creation? God created the world in a manner that he can become known to them. And that will ultimately be their ultimate goodness. They will recognize his greatness. And as a result of that, they can make themselves into a chariot, which means they can make themselves into a place where he himself, God himself, can actualize himself in them and through them. And therefore, they will cleave to him. To cleave to him. And this is only possible by God creating the world exactly the way he created it. And then in another portal he writes, that the purpose of the Sphirot is to actualize, to bring to light, of his actions, and his names. In other words, to actualize certain potentials. And that's why he's doing it, whatever. So we have some explanations. Now, this is not the place where the Rebbe is going to discuss this. In the beginning of Samach Vav, there's another great magnum opus of the Rebbe Rashab from the year 5766. Over there, in the beginning, he discusses the reasons for creation. And he he rejects these reasons that he's bringing over here as the ultimate reason. And he then delivers the Alter Rebbe's explanation, which is to have a home in the lower world. But it's interesting over here, he doesn't even mention that. He's basically following more Kabbalistic reasoning, not Hasidic explanation, but Kabbalistic reasonings for creation. But because over here this is not his explanation. Over here, what he wants to just give us is that there is something about the emanation of the spheros. And we can understand why he's not talking about the creation of the lower world of Tachtonim, because he's not talking about the purpose of making Tachtonim, the lower world. Over here he's talking about the purpose of emanating Sphirot, which is not lower, which is higher, which is the divine realm. So there has to be a purpose. Why did he emanate? Why does he even emanate at all? Didn't have to emanate. And if he emanated, why 10? And exactly these 10. However, he says, to know the purpose of this, we don't have a clue if we only getting one file or two files. If we're getting only to glimpse at one sphere, one attribute, and we don't see all 10, we don't know what the general purpose is. But the koidim shenetzel is galo as spheres, and before it was emanated and it was revealed the 10 spheres, they were all included in him. Like we learned earlier, that's the 10 hidden spheres. These are the 10 hidden spheres. These are the roots of all the lights that are integrated and included in the Ein Sof. We explained earlier. The Yesh Behem, and over there, when they were all together, you can see clearly in other words, since they're all unified as one powerful force, the intention of what they're all about is the picture of the entirety of what this is all about is felt very strongly. The intention of the emanator is present in them, but in this that he is formulating his otherwise infinite power and narrowing it down to 10 is sensed very strongly. And we've already learned that the 10 spheres, when they are still in the Ein Sof, swallowed up in the Ein Sof, over there, they're not something. They're all utterly simple. Then kulam klulim yachad. They're all perfectly unified as one. Umeir behem kavanas hamatzel. Like we said earlier, before you differentiate something, and you get everything, all the details are all in one point. The one point is very, very powerful. The intention is shining in them very strongly. Begilui mamish in a very revealed way. Bebchinas or naila umufla, with an incredible, powerful, and wondrous light. And that light is precisely what the worlds can't handle. The purpose of it all, cannot be revealed in the worlds. Because it's too much. But when it starts to differentiate, so it's that overall general powerful purpose, that general idea, is felt to a much greater, becomes lessened. And like we learned earlier, by the teacher teaching, as we're going to see. Let's leave the rest as just Hashem for tomorrow's class.